Julian Assange started hacking pretty early in life, referring to himself as an ethical hacker, leave no damage and share the information you find. He claims that he was hacking into thousands of systems, including the Pentagon, as far back as 1988 when he was just 17 years old. He may or may not have been a part of a 1989 hack at NASA and formed a hacking group called the International Subversives. He claims as part of that group to have hacked Milnet, the U.S. military secret data network, though there's been no evidence, at least none publicly acknowledged, of any such hacks. The U.S. government would have good reason to not reveal such hacks if they happened, unless they were able to apprehend and try the hackers, of course. Acknowledging such hacks would be a national security problem for the U.S., and so, well, without evidence, we may never know. He was charged in 1994 with a hack into Telecom Australia, and while waiting for that, he was held in a psychiatric hospital and then living in the woods around Melbourne. He would plead guilty to a number of the charges eventually and was fined. Both before and after that incident, he was helping the government. First, with technical advice and support that helped the Victoria Police Child Exploitation Unit to prosecute people who were publishing child porn, and then to remove a book detailing how to build a bomb on the internet. After his sentencing, he worked as a consultant for a number of large corporations. By the early 1990s, he began the lead up to WikiLeaks by facilitating leaks of information for activists and lawyers, a lot of it aimed at exposing local corruption. He facilitated insider leaks for government organizations that were operating in less than transparent, objective and professional ways. One of the first leaks involving the United States was the publication of a patent granted to the NSA in August 1999, and that was for voice data harvesting technology that could have listened to overseas phone calls, probably does, transcribe them, and archive them without anyone being the wiser. It was another 7 years before WikiLeaks launched its first leak. WikiLeaks began publishing internet censorship lists, leaks from government and corporate entities, and classified media. There were leaks related to the drone strikes in Yemen, corruption across Arab nations, extrajudicial executions conducted by the Kenyan police, material related to Tibetan unrest in China, and the Petrogate oil scandal in Peru. No one and nothing was off limits. How embarrassing to have your data leaked in such a way that it's near impossible to cover it up, and you have to deal with it. No longer could governments, corporations, or even powerful individuals count on operating in secrecy while controlling the narrative. Exposing corruption can have very bad side effects. For example, in Kenya, after the WikiLeaks exposure of corruption, it became an issue in the next election. The government responded with violence, and there were 1,300 eventually killed and another 350,000 displaced. What a terrible consequence of the leak. We don't downplay that, but on the other hand, the exposure also meant that the people of Kenya were given back a level of power, corruption having killed many more as money is diverted from helping to care for the people, the Kenyan currency is devalued, and the impacts on the economy that led to low employment, high crime, malnutrition, and starvation. They leaked Swiss bank records, previously a haven for people hiding money, including illicit money. Bank Julius Baer only made the issue far more public by trying to get a California court to issue an injunction against WikiLeaks. Media, corporations, and governments the world over became suddenly very, very aware of WikiLeaks. Still, that awareness did not attract as much attention as WikiLeaks intended. WikiLeaks leaked a report of a commission of inquiry into corruption in Turks and Caicos. There was an injunction preventing its publication by some of the powerful individuals that were named in the report. Now, WikiLeaks published the full unredacted report. How embarrassing for the foreign property developers who were trying to bribe local politicians. Oh no. Then there was, in 2010, a leak of a 2007 airstrike in Baghdad that showed U.S. forces murdering 18 civilians from a helicopter in Iraq, which is a war crime. And we all know, as much as the U.S. protests that they don't commit war crimes, that they do. Those killed include a Reuters journalist and his assistant. Reuters was denied copies of the video under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act, exposure of U.S. war crimes. Imagine that. WikiLeaks slammed right into U.S. propaganda around the Iraq War by leaking nearly 400,000 U.S. Army field reports from that war. A note to propagandists: there is always a risk that your propaganda is going to be exposed. WikiLeaks is just the forum for the exposure. It's the platform. They didn't create the information. All the while, Assange understood the risk to him of such leaks. He traveled frequently, he used false names, used encrypted phones, and paid cash for everything. It would be a challenge for any foreign intelligence personnel, police agencies, or anyone else who might be looking to make him go away to even find him and affect their plans. The more public he was known, the harder it would be to come and quietly erase him. But the more enemies he made. We all knew the U.S. acts one way publicly toward other countries and a whole other way behind the curtains. We all know that. We've known that forever. They have a terrible habit of interfering in foreign countries and foreign relations to try to bend everyone to their benefit and their will. And here comes 250,000 U.S. diplomatic cables that make that all far more apparent. Now there's proof of what anyone with knowledge of the news in the last 100 years has always known. It's just now we knew it more thoroughly. The whole incident is known as Cablegate. Oops, all that espionage just leaked all over the place. So embarrassing. Cablegate actually helped start the Arab Spring, which resulted with U.S. enemy number 2.5, Muammar Gaddafi, being seized and killed by his own people. So you know the U.S. should be grateful in some way. They wouldn't be, though, because they didn't control the leak. It interfered with their interference. There was then the release of information in the hands of the U.S. military again, including detainee assessments for those housed at Guantanamo and their delicate information. The cables were released with all their redactions removed. These leaks are what raised the ire of the U.S. government. Now, I'm all about holding the powerful to account and making them more transparent. But the unredacted cables put foreign sources at risk of kidnap, torture, murder. It doesn't appear that any of the intelligence sources has been killed that we know of. The risk was there and it was great. And in fact, a number of those sources have disappeared and no one is able to confirm what has happened to them. Or if they are able to confirm, they're not talking. So now he's wanted by the U.S. and the media are focused on him more than they are focused on WikiLeaks. He takes up asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. The U.S. stationed Metro Police outside the embassy for more than 3 years, waiting for him to exit so they could arrest him. They were finally withdrawn because it was costing the UK government too much to keep them there. In total, it cost them over £12 million. While he was there, he helped Edward Snowden, who is a whistleblower, flee from the U.S. law enforcement, just irritating Americans that much more. They tricked the Americans into exposing their relationship in that all it took was a call from intelligence officials to close airspace to a legally immune flight carrying Bolivian President Evo Morales. Bolivia would blame Assange, but it wasn't Assange who defied international law and forced that plane to be grounded in Austria. It was the U.S., Italy, France, and Spain. That's who it was. All the while, he was making life awkward for Ecuador, though, with charges of election interference and suggestions that he was spying on embassy staff. Then there was the implication, likely false and slightly vengeful, that a Democratic staffer was murdered for leaking DNC documents through WikiLeaks. Then WikiLeaks started leaking CIA documents in the Vault 7 leak. The Trump administration began calling them hostile intelligence services rather than dealing with the actual exposures. He was becoming less and less neutral, Assange was, in the leaks, and began hurting his own credibility, spreading misinformation on behalf of the Catalan independence movement, for example. Rather than continuing to leak actual information, he began sharing fake images on Twitter. And honestly, that really hurts the guy's campaign. Honestly, having looked at what happened during the referendum there, he had more than enough with continuing to leak information and could have supported Catalonians by merely ensuring that they had access to all the information they needed to vote. For years, Ecuador dealt with the unruly Assange by just cutting off his internet access from time to time. The U.S. began making open threats to withdraw economic cooperation, counter narcotics assistance, and other agreements if Assange was not handed over. His relationship with the Ecuadorian embassy began breaking down as well. UC Global, who were supposed to be providing security for the embassy, instead bugged it and gave the CIA access to the recordings. Big time no. Lawsuits over that remain ongoing. In 2019, Ecuador finally revoked Assange's asylum. He was arrested for failing to appear in court years before and carried out of the embassy by Metro Police. He was indicted in the U.S. with conspiracy and espionage charges. This is all in the context of an administration that labeled a free press as the enemy of the people. He's been fighting extradition ever since, with the latest developments backing the idea that Assange's life will be at risk if he's extradited, and calling on the current administration to end the prosecution of Assange. His final appeal hearing is set to February 20th and 21st, and we will update you on what happens because the decision isn't likely to be a quick one. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these videos and you want to see more, please click the subscribe button and hit those notifications so that you don't miss any uploads. We appreciate you. Thanks.